Hey guys, it's Chloe. I am just popping in for a little end of year wrap up. We've got a couple different things. One of them is some books I've read this year, some favorite books, some weird books, some books I want to talk about. And then we've got some New Year's resolutions, and I hope that you'll tell me all about yours as well. So let's get started. So with the new year, I want to do a little video, just sort of checking in, just taking stock, looking at the past year, looking at the year to come. And one of the things, if you guys follow me on Instagram, you know that I love books. I love to read. I think I read a fair amount. I think I read about 62, 63, 64 books this past year. So what I want to do in this video is to look back at all the books that I've read and to make some resolutions for the year to come. And I'm going to do my makeup while I do it. So I did read too many books this year to go over all of them. I don't even want to really, because most of them I don't really have that much to talk about, but I do have some special favorites that I want to talk about, and I have some that are just, there's just so much to say about some of these. So strap in, get yourself a cup of tea. I've got my green matcha here. Well, let's talk about books. So first, I've got kind of a category, just sort of a general trend in my reading that I really wanted to, I just sort of decided this is the year. This is the year I'm going to read some more LGBT fiction, and you might know, in the past, I've read them. I've read some Sarah Waters, but I started realizing that there are really only so many authors that write good LGBT fiction. Like there's some that it's okay. Like I read Call Me by Your Name, which I thought was bad. And I read When Katie Met Cassidy, which I also thought was bad. Which I feel bad about saying because these were both recommendations by friends, but I don't know, I just didn't think they were very good. And part of that is that they were just very basic. The thing about Call Me by Your Name is that it was literally supposed to be written as, or at least this is what I've heard, I don't know if this is 100% true, but it was supposed to be just written as your basic romance story. It's just about two men, and the thing is, it's basic. There's just nothing to grab me, and that's okay. But thing about basic stories is if you write a very specific story about a really specific thing, I don't mean contrived, I just mean every person's perspective, every person's experiences are going to be different and specific in a way that makes them feel authentic. And if you write a general basic story that doesn't even feel real, but if you write a story that's really intricate about this very specific person, then it doesn't matter how different your life experiences are, you're going to feel authentically connected to them because you feel like they're a real person that you actually believe is a person. So that's just a sort of thing about the state of LGBT fiction in general, and kind of why it's hard to find. There's actually a YouTuber that I watched recently who did a whole video on why good representation is boring, and I think that there's a lot of that. If you're writing good representation, good stories that aren't going to freak anybody out, they're not going to be there's nothing you could possibly argue against, then yeah, it's going to be, nobody's going to get angry, but, well, except for, people who get angry about it being gay in the first place. But if anything, maybe that should be more liberating, not less, you're not going to please everybody anyway, so at least, why not swing for the fence, I just decided, on some unconscious level, at some point along the way, I decided, isn't romance kind of trashy, and here's the thing. Romance, I don't think, is really any trashier than any other genre. It really depends on how it's written. I've definitely read some I've read some trash, and I don't even mean salacious. I just mean badly written. Yeah, I've read some trash of basically any genre. And the thing is, I've been avoiding LGBT stories that, just by virtue of it being about falling in love. A lot of these stories are going to be romance genre. The ones that I had read before, I think most of them were actually like crime or something. Like I always had to like justify it, like oh well, I'm reading it, they just happen to be gay, they're not, it's not, I'm not reading it for the relationship, I'm not one of those gays who like needs the, I don't know, the salacious story. Like, well, okay, so what if I just read a trashy romance story? So I read, it's so stupid, it's like, it's called It Takes Two to Tumble, and I was just like, okay, like I've never read one of these stories before, let's just give it a try. It was so bad. It was so bad. It was another very basic romance story. And to be honest, I thought it was kind of, it was dumb on so many levels. Okay, there were things I appreciated about it. One of them is that the character traits that make characters individual, like one of them had like really bad dyslexia, and his son had really bad dyslexia, and they just like couldn't read. And that the threat that the son might get sent to a boarding school became a big catalyst to like a bunch of different plot lines all wrapping up one after the other, because he like runs away, and then he finds out that his father has the same like dyslexia, and you know, I thought that was actually kind of cool. These children all had like the same personality, or like maybe they just weren't in the story enough that I noticed any difference. For some reason, the characters were called by their first names, even though it was like ostensibly set during the Regency, and so that was kind of weird. It actually reminds me of something that a lady who, I used to work at a comic book store, and she comes in and comes in to buy like this many comic books, and she says, and she's my hero. I love that she just like comes in and she's like telling me about all the Sherlock fan fiction that she's reading, and she's like, yeah, you know, I wish that people would just write, you know, Holmes and Watson rather than John and Sherlock. She's like, these are Victorian men, they wouldn't be calling each other by their first names. But with this author, it was constant. It wasn't just in the dialogue too, it was also in the narrative descriptions of things, and so that was kind of annoying. I was like, okay, well, that kind of takes me out of the story a bit. You know, but again, it was what it needed to be. I tried to read the sequels. They were like they were also really stupid. I was like, they'd have titles like Two Rogues Make a Right. I was like, this is a lot. But you know, I tried it. You know, I'll try anything once. There was that. So again, not really a good book, but definitely something to think about. Now there were two or three, depending on how you kind of slice it. If I'm doing my top 5, it'll be 2. If you just want to talk about good books, it'll be 3. One Last Stop was like, kind of like, it was like Captain America, because you got like this one character who's like out of time, and like it was like this like lesbian romance. It was really cute. I thought it was a cute story. But I actually like the other one better. This is about, it's called Red, White, and Royal Blue, and it's about the president's son who ends up in a relationship with the prince of the English royal family. I don't know what he's technically prince of. I don't think, because he's not the next in line. He also is like, his grandmother is like this like surrogate for Queen Elizabeth, and then there's her daughter. Like none of these people are like real. These are all like, so I don't know what his title is, but he's one of the princes. He's the spare, and then he has a sister, like an older sister. So I guess it's like the oldest son, and then the sister, and then there's this guy. Now I don't think that there's a single person like who has more baggage than Prince Henry. Like I do not think that he would be a good like romantic partner. Like he's a sweet guy like in the story, but like I cannot imagine dating somebody who is like so wrapped up in like levels of like royal decorum where you're just like scared to come out. You're like closet with your whole family. There's like a national crisis if you do it. Like it was a lot. It was so much. I get it as a romance story, but one thing I think is kind of funny that in LGBT, so in straight romance stories, you often have one character who's like, I'm not interested in a relationship, like Elizabeth Bennet, you're beneath me, or like whatever, you know. But then in in gay stories, both characters want to be in a relationship, and it's circumstance keeping them apart. Like, it's so funny. It's like either someone's being blackmailed, or like it's just like something. Like, there's always something like that, especially if it's a period story. Now, one period story that had none of that was Song of Achilles, which was so good. That's another one where, you know, they did a retelling of the Odyssey from the witch's point of view. Then they did a retelling of the Iliad from Patroclus's point of view, which also, I will just say that in It Takes Two to Tumble, the ship that they were on was the HMS Patroclus, which is like just so gay. It's so gay. It's so stupid. It's the dumbest thing, and it made me angry every time I had to. It made me angry. I was so angry because it was so dumb. But the story, the Song of Achilles, cutest. Oh my god, it was so cute. Like, the whole story was just about how in love they were. I just, oh, it was so good. But while I'm on this topic, there's actually this very funny thing where the books that I enjoy and the books that I would give as gifts don't always overlap. Like, there's often books where I read it and I'm like, I want people to read that. I want someone to enjoy this book as much as I did. But you gotta think about who the recipient is, and, you know, not everybody wants to read a gay romance, no matter how good they are. Although I do, if it's a good. I mean, if it's good, if it's well written, if it's bad, I have no interest in it. But if it's good, send me recommendations. Put it in the comment. What's your favorite book? I just want all the books. Give me recommendations. All right. So I also really enjoyed the Curse of Chaleon. It's a very different genre. Totally changing genres now. Curse of Chaleon was. It's the second book, and ostensibly it's a trilogy, but each one of these stories really does stand on its own. I've heard a lot of people saying, like, oh yeah, Disney could really write stories about, you know, princesses of any age, or, you know, duchesses of any age or whatever. This story is about the Dowager Queen. No longer has her responsibilities that she has to do, and she's thinking like, oh, I'm an old lady, I'm just gonna have to like do my responsibilities and then like die or whatever. But she goes on an adventure and she finds, you know, 40's not that old. At one point she says it would take an act of God for me to have a boyfriend. Well, guess who gets a boyfriend? I mean, it does take an act of God, but she gets her boyfriend. You know, just life turns around for her. And it's a really sweet story. So yeah, so that's one of the best ones I read this year. What else did I like? Life and Death of Letitia King, another book. I can't tell someone to go read a heavy philosophy phenomenology. Like, here, Merry Christmas. It's a book of phenomenology about a murder of a trans teenager. Like, no thanks. I don't want to put a cheery topic. Now, it didn't stop me from giving a book about death and dying during the Civil War. For a Christmas present, which was such a good book. That book was by Dr. Faust. It was so good. I mean, I recommend it for anybody. It is like the most different kind of book about the Civil War I've ever read. I mean, I've never. Jay Winter writes similar stuff, and she does cite him, and he cites her, but it's unlike so many other books because it's all about how people at the time experienced a kind of death that was so different from the Victorian standard of good death that they wanted for their sons. Now these young people are dying these unexpected deaths in states far away in horrifying numbers. And mortician's profession is changing a lot during this time, and they also have to deal with the fact that they're expected to kill each other. You know, dying is one thing, but killing, like, how do you kill somebody? You know, you've got to learn how to do it, and that's going to be hard. And so this book is fascinating, but it's actually not the only book about death, and it's also not the only book about remembering the Civil War that I read this year. I've been reading Ask a Mortician's book, The Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. I'll put her link down below. She's another YouTuber. It's very interesting. I was actually recommended it by somebody who was kind of on the fence about it. I mean, I personally liked it. I mean, I can see the complaints that they made about it. I definitely wouldn't say it's a hard read. I mean, it's a hard read on a lot of accounts, and I can kind of see where certain things may not have been said the best or maybe didn't age the best, but I don't know, I liked the book. Maybe, I don't know. Then I also finished reading this kind of weird book recently called Confederates in the Attic. Another recommendation, actually, by a friend of that same friend. It was about this one guy's trip all over the South and talking with different people who would remember the Confederacy in different ways, people who wrote about the Confederacy, someone who was married to a Confederate soldier, and just different chapters of, you know, daughters of the Confederacy, sons of the Confederacy, remembering. And the funny thing about this book is that I never felt like I was being asked to agree with these people who were just so fond of their racist ancestors. But I was being asked to understand them. And I did get the sense in a lot of cases where they were very earnest and human in their wanting to be able to hold on to or be proud of the past. But I also felt like there was something missing. There's this great passage at the end of Drew Faust's book where she talks about how creating these memorial sites for the Confederacy, it had to be done by the women, because if men were doing it, then it would be seen as a political act. Whereas if women are the ones who are collecting memories and putting together shrines, it's something that's more emotional. And the result is the same. The result is political. You are physically shaping the town around you. You're physically shaping who you have statues to, who you revere. And there's actually an element of sexism saying that just because it was women who did it, it can't be important. Well, it was important. The way that we name our public buildings, our streets, the monuments that we have around us, it all shapes the way that we think about the past, who we honor, who we revere. And from that point of view, it matters a lot, and it really should be seen as political. And I don't think that anybody that he interviewed really saw it that way. And I don't think that anybody except for, you know, a couple of maybe park rangers, really thought about that side of things. What does it say, and how might memory actually distort a historical conversation more than it contributes to it? So there's a lot to say about this book. I don't think it was necessarily the best history, but I also don't know if it was trying to be a history. So there's just a lot to think and feel about that book. So there's two more that I want to talk about. One of them that was absolutely coconuts. The other one, which is kind of a neat little segue into my next thing I want to talk about, which is New Year's resolutions. So back in the day when I was middle schooler, I was a little kid, I read this series called The Children of the Lamp, and I thought it was awesome. I thought that it was super cool to have these I guess there's like 12, 13 years old. They're like, they've got like super djinn powers. I don't know, I just thought it was like the coolest thing. They went on a trip to Egypt and the North Pole, Afghanistan, England, just all over the world. And as a child, I thought this is just the coolest story. But as an adult, there are some things that I just like didn't really like. Looking back, I'm like, how was I? But then again, I was a child, and you know, times were different. In like 2005 is when I read this. It was a while ago, and oh man, some things back then were okay that, oh my god, whoa. And I cannot possibly go over everything that was crazy about this book, but I can go over two things. One that sort of like woke me up, and then the other one that I just had to stop reading. It was too much. So first one, this is actually in the second book. I don't know, I couldn't get a hold of the first book in the series in audiobook form, and this was during the pandemic, like when I couldn't get to the library so easy. So there's this side character, and he, you know, he does a little bit of this, he does a little bit of that, he works in the space program, he apparently he's a businessman all over, I think he's a Canadian, but he's been living in the US. This guy's name is Ball Huckster, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of an unusual name, Huckster, like, okay, I'll keep my eye on him. And by the end of the book, he turns out to be, like, if not like the big bad, definitely a piece of the bad guy puzzle, which, okay. And I just kind of got thinking, I'm like, hold on, what ethnicity is this name from? So I look it up, and I tell my sibling, I'm like, hey, guess where this guy's from? And they say, oh no, please tell me he's not Jewish. And I said, oh, he's Romani. And here's the thing. It's okay to have a character who's like bad from, you know, anywhere. But if they're bad in some very tropey ways, like if the ways that this character, and if that's the only representation that they have, this book is overwhelmingly white. That's the other thing that's like kind of weird, is that these are Jinn characters, but they're like white. Like, okay, it's not great. And then you've got this character who's like this like sneaky huckster. I'm like, oh, come on. Really? You have to make him Romani? Really? But that's not even the worst thing. So at this point, I'm like on alert. I'm just like, all right, head on a swivel. What's about to happen? I'm reading the third book in the series. I did not even get through this one. Oh man. This is hard to say, but the characters, the kids, and then their uncle's butler, who is so racist that he literally brings baby food to foreign countries so that he doesn't have to eat that foreign muck. This guy and the kids, in order to blend in India, okay, remember they're Jinn, they can do like whatever they want. Physically, they make themselves Indian. And I'm not saying that like tan level, it's not just like a skin tone thing. No, there's a line where this butler, they're saying like, oh yeah, and he's like Indian on the inside now too. He's like eating spicy food. I'm just like, oh god. Oh god, this is like some race essentialism that I was not prepared for. It's a yikes from me. So there's that. And then, funnily enough, the next book I also want to talk about because of its understanding of race. So I was reading Dracula, and the character, Professor Dr. Van Helsing, he's like their expert, their vampire expert, that they get to come and help them out with their whole vampire situation. And he goes on this rant at one point about how criminals are this like completely separate group of people. They have like a child brain. They can't reason properly. They don't think through things in the same way that an adult would. And this isn't just like one character. This is one character who's saying what a lot of people in Victorian society actually did believe, that criminals were their own race of people, and like some people are just genetically predisposed to doing lots of crime, which, okay, that's a lot. Like there was actually a rule in the book saying that if you were shorter than 5'7", you couldn't be a police officer because you probably had some like criminal heritage. Like I'm a criminal on my mom's side, one corner criminal on my mom's side, or whatever you want to say. That's kind of how they thought about it. So, yikes. But it got me thinking about all the ways that people have tried to justify or figure out criminology and justice and all of these things, you know, all the different models that we've used to approach this. So one of them would be this like very Victorian idea of, you know, some people just are criminals, and if you export them all to Australia, then there'll be no one left to do crimes. Of course, it doesn't work like that. You know, Australia is doing just fine, and there's still crime in Britain. So what's up with that? Anyway, another model would be Confucius's idea that all you have to do is lead by example and show people how to live a virtuous life and follow the rules yourselves, and then everybody else will follow the rules too. Neither one of those is the model that we currently have. We tend to, now There are two very different ideas, maybe even three. One of them is how our system does work, which is very punitive. It's very, you do a bad thing and you get punished. We also have some restorative justice tactics. These are usually based in social science and criminology. What would work the best is to either restore a community or to restore somebody who has done a crime and try to build them up to both to prevent, try to make a community so strong that people don't do crime. And this can be done in social work, in funding, in lots of different ways. And then when someone does a crime, don't just punish them, also help them move forward with things. And then the other thing that I hear a lot, and this isn't based in a broad poll, this isn't based in that much. I hear a lot of people say, you've got to take some personal responsibility. And this is actually, I'm going to pivot now. I'm kind of going away from Dracula, and I'm kind of actually I'm going to head into resolution territory in just a minute. Because there's a couple of different things I've noticed when I talk about these big ideas. And I love big ideas, I really do. But I do think that sometimes it can be difficult to keep track of them all, especially if you don't have a lot of convenient charts and different ways to anchor ideas down. Often I find myself wishing that I had a whiteboard when I talk about big ideas, just because it's so easy to misplace ideas, to get things confused. Now, one thing that I used to have to deal with a lot was the idea of a snuck premise. So, for example, have you stopped hitting your wife? Well, the snuck premise is that at one point at least, I was hitting my wife. Well, if I say I've stopped hitting her, it means I used to. If I say no, I have not, it means I'm still hitting her. There's like the snuck premise is there. So people used to sneak premises in, and I wouldn't notice. I would just start arguing like, oh, of course, like this is the thing that I was saying, and I just took them in good faith. I've gotten a little bit better. I'm not the best debater, if I'm being honest. So I used to be so bad at that. Now, I'm a little bit better, still not the best debater, but I've noticed a new pattern that's been tripping me up a couple times this year. And that is people will abstract a concept, and then pivot. This has happened twice now where I and/or the audience didn't quite catch what was going on. The first one was about criminology. The second one was about taxes, of all things. I don't even know how I get in these conversations, but I was down home visiting my family for both of them. And the conversation was about how crime is starting to rise in Durham, and there's so many different reasons why it might. So, first off, it's a very quickly growing city. Second, it used to be one industry and now it's different industries, and so anytime that happens, there's going to be some sort of push and pull between the old population and the new population. There are all the different crises we've had. It's growing because people keep migrating to the area. There's a whole lot of different things going on. So from that point of view, it makes a lot of sense that there's a rise in crime, and specifically there's a rise in gang violence, gangs specifically coming in from the Northeast. So I sort of said out loud, I was like, well, I wonder what the response is going to be. If this is going to be more of a social work approach, or if this is going to be more of a stamp down on crime approach. And, typically speaking, it's going to be one or the other. The response I got was this lengthy chat about personal responsibility and how you don't need handouts from the government in order to, do well in life. And, well, I guess people hear social work and they think, first off, I must, in this instance right now, I must be saying, I want universal basic income for everyone, which I do. But that's not what this was about. This was about talking about how social work and preemptive measures often can help prevent crime, and is a very, very legitimate approach that a municipal government can take. The alternative being more police. Now, here's the thing about personal responsibility is that it really only goes so far as the criminal is concerned. You do the crime, personal responsibility, you get punished, or you restorative justice, or what have you. But what happens if you are the victim of the crime? You are personally responsible. What more could you possibly do as the victim of the crime? Be more personally responsible? No. At a certain point, you're going to rely on the government to either crack down on crime or to restore your community. Like it or not, We are in a society, and we need something. We need some kind of safety net. And I'm not even saying UBI. No, I am talking about a certain amount of normalcy and stability in our communities. I'm talking about some amount of either restorative justice to make sure that everybody has opportunities aplenty, which is one side of things, or there's more policing. I don't, again, I was just asking which way did we, I wonder which way we're going to go. I wasn't even asking, well, what do you think? What do we think Durham's going to do? But there is a very clear pattern. You abstract what I said, and you pivot to something easier to argue against, which is what you wish I had said, and it certainly was not what I said. Now, there was also a second time that this happened, and another family gathering. This time somebody was much more far right wing. We were talking about voting rights, and it came up that early on the only people who could vote were property owners, and fair enough. From a certain point of view, I guess that makes sense. Again, not my point of view, but I can see where you're coming from. In the same way that I can see where the Romans were coming from, that you had to be a veteran in order to vote. I get it. From a certain point of view, it makes sense, and I don't agree. But he says if you don't pay taxes, you shouldn't get to vote. Which again is that's sneaky, because I said property. Now, property tax is one kind of tax. He is talking about taxes. He says taxes generally, but what do we mean in a modern day America when we say taxes? We mean income tax. So he abstracts from property to taxation, and then he pivots from property tax to income tax, which didn't exist in the same way that it does now at the foundation of this country. We really had more import taxes, some excise taxes, not nearly as much as income tax as we do now. So again, sneaky, you abstract what I say and then you pivot. And I do need to get better at catching people when they do that. So I think that one of my New Year's resolutions is to just be more mindful and more aware when the thing is, I don't even feel like I'm debating people. It's more of just a be on guard all the time. I certainly don't want to do that with my friends and family, but I don't know, sometimes I just feel like I'm so I guess get baited into these conversations, and of course I want to engage with the people I enjoy, and I like discussing big ideas. I just it's just so difficult when I want to have a conversation in good faith, to feel like I have to be on guard or I'll get caught out. Oh my goodness, maybe I should bring a big chart paper with me everywhere. Bring butcher paper and expo markers. But yeah, no, just being more on guard, more mindful, and really making sure that people don't put words in my mouth, I think is probably my biggest thing in terms of, I guess, mindfulness and self-improvement. Of course, I also have some easier resolutions, things like, keep reading. It's going to be hard to beat getting a master's. I did just finish my teaching master. I feel like I just started that, but I did just finish. It took 15 months. That was a good resolution, finished up by the end of the year. And then the last one is, I really want to get married. I don't plan to get married in a year, but my goal is, and my friend tells me it's a goal, not a resolution, I want to go on 100 first dates. That's 2 dates every week, maybe a couple of exceptions depending on, if there's a bunch of travel or something slow or whatever, but I want to go on 100 first dates, meet a bunch of people, and hopefully I will find the right person, go on more dates with them. Until next time, Happy New Year.